This presentation is about understanding the value that you provide to your audience, what they really care about, and we're going to cover why that matters. There's a few different areas that we'll cover today. The first is why value matters, the impact it has on your business, how to identify the value that you are providing, and there will be multiple ones. It will not just be one thing, it will be multiple levels of value. And then finally, how it impacts your business or how you can integrate what you learn about the value you provide or could provide into the different areas of your business. And then the three main focuses there. So that's what we're going to cover. But for those of you in the room who don't already know me, some know me very well, and then some don't know me at all. So I just thought I'd introduce a little bit of background. And there's some fun facts for the ones that do know me because they know the background. So we can maybe talk about that later. So I've actually worked in marketing for 20 years, mostly focusing on digital marketing technology. But the fact is, I wanted to be a psychologist when I was at school. That's what my careers day conversation was about. But I didn't fancy the years of qualifications and study and debt and all the rest of it. So instead, I moved into marketing because it felt like the closest practical hands-on way to deal with what made people tick. And as my career's progressed, I've become more and more interested in consumer behavior, the brain and how it impacts consumer decision making. And you're going to see an awful lot of that today. But it's come to a point where understanding your audience and value, it's really this sort of peak of everything that I've been doing. So that's why it's brought me to this point today. And you're going to hear an awful lot about consumer psychology anyway in this. So, I mean, really, marketing, isn't it just psychology, but with better parties? And if you do want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if you don't already know me, then there's a QR code if you haven't already selected it. So, on to the main event. Are you worth it? And I don't mean you, obviously, you are worth it. You are a valuable human being, but is your offering, is your business worth it? Like it or not, this is the question that your potential customers, your prospects are asking when they make the decision whether to buy from you or not. And ultimately, this is because a business at its core, forget about the trappings like the office, the staff, the whatever, the parties. A business is an exchange of value. You have a business, or a business survives when it delivers something that your customers value enough to pay more than it costs you to provide. So I'm going to say that one more time because I tried to make it more succinct, but it's quite a difficult sentence to get. A business survives when it delivers something that your customers value enough to pay more than it costs for you to provide. If the costs to provide something go up and your costs don't, that's obviously when a business can fail. But it also can thrive when one of two things happen, or a combination of both of these things. When you reduce your costs while maintaining the value in some way, and technology is a great way to do that. Understanding the value also enables you to do that, making sure that you remove bloat and extraneous costs. Or if you provide more value and are able to charge a premium, and there's not necessarily an upper limit on that. And we're going to talk about how to figure that out and how to demonstrate it. And if you can do both, obviously, then we get to supercharge things. So that's why this is worthwhile. Now, the thing is, marketing nowadays, or the marketing industry, or a lot of the marketing that people do, and why efforts miss the mark, sorry, is that the focus is on the technology. We're being pulled further and further from an understanding of the customer. We're being pulled into, I know somebody asked about social media marketing, but this is an important point for you as well. We're being pulled more and more into algorithms and AI and further away from the consumer. AI, technology, tactics, they will continue to evolve, and it is sort of a distraction if you haven't got these fundamentals sorted out. That is something that really needs to be addressed in marketing today. And there's going to be a really clear explanation as to why that's important actually in a bit. So how do we identify worth? Worth is essentially perceived value, and that's one of the things, one of the struggles with value is it is perceived, and there are things that we can do to influence it, but ultimately it's down to your customer how they perceive things. So some questions to really help you get to the root of your value are here. What does my audience actually need and want from as a result of working with me? How does my business make their life better, easier, or more enjoyable? These questions are particularly helpful for business to consumer because enjoyment is, quite a big part of a lot of business to consumer brands. And what job does it do? So there's a few studies and areas where they're looking at what job a product or a service is hired to do, which is an interesting way. And often it's not what you think. That's one of the things that I really want you to consider today. Is your offering actually doing the job that you think it's doing? You could be trying to sell something that actually your customer's not buying. They're buying something else. They're buying something else. So Bain's Elements of Value provides a really practical way to understand this. This is Bain's and Co, who are a consulting firm, huge consulting firm, and they work with these huge blue chip companies. But they provided these frameworks that are really helpful. I've actually the text has been cut off on the left, but on the left hand side it's the B2B elements of value, so that's business to business, and then on the right hand side it's the business to consumer elements of value. These are different in a couple of core ways, which I'll go into, but they are the same in a few ways. So if you've ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's a kind of similar framework to that, in that the bottom levels are functional, things that must happen in order for people to kind of move up to the other values. What you'll see at the bottom of both of these frameworks are functional elements that might need to be ticked. They don't all apply. You have to select for your customer which do apply. And on the left hand side, you'll see far more of these because with business to business decisions, there are multiple people in the decision making process, and people have to make a more rational call because they've got to justify something that they might have done or a decision that they might have made. And that's just sort of necessary, but you are still dealing with humans. The business to business side still includes emotional sides because we really need to think about this as human to human, rather than just business to business or business to consumer. And the reason for this is we are dealing with outdated hardware. And if you look at this diagram, the purple element is the prefrontal cortex. It's the human side of the brain. This is what has evolved later on for us. It is the side of our brain that makes decisions on New Year's Eve about what we want to achieve in our lives. It is our best version of ourselves. And the orange part in this diagram is the more primal part of our brain. It's the oldest bit. It's often referred to as the monkey brain or the lizard brain. It's highly emotional. It's where the amygdala is, which is involved with our fear and stress response. And we have these two parts of ourselves. We have a duality. And you will see this play out if you've ever wanted to lose weight and yet had the takeaway, wanted to save money and yet got the takeaway, or something else. We often will want to do a thing, we'll make a decision about a logical thing we want for our lives, and yet we will act in a way that is contradictory to that. Now, this is very important for buying decisions because as a consumer, and I do want you to think about this as a consumer, not just as a business owner, marketer, sales professional, we need to almost guard ourselves about this. What you might find is that you see an advert, not speaking from personal experience here, but maybe on Instagram, that when I am full of energy at 10 a.m. and have self-control, not that I'd be on Instagram at 10 a.m. on a weekday anyway, but that I would be able to go, that's interesting, not really bothered, going to move on. Whereas 11 p.m., quite tired, just avoiding going to sleep, that's when I'm far more likely to buy. If I've had some alcohol as well, even more likely to buy. That's where people wake up on a Sunday morning, maybe with some purchases that they wouldn't have made at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. So this is these parts of the brain. So a great way to think about this is this metaphor called the elephant and the rider. This will impact so many areas of your life, but I also want you to think about this from a consumer perspective. The elephant is this old primal part of your brain. It is strong, it is emotionally driven by really primal instincts. And the rider is the prefrontal cortex, the rational, logical side of the brain. And we feel like it has control, that the rider has control about where things are going. And to an extent, it does, to an extent. But if the elephant wants to do something, it's happening. There is nothing that is going to stop the elephant from doing what it wants to do, particularly as kind of time goes on in the day. And people get thinking fatigue. This particularly is important when it comes to decision making and the paradox of choice. As marketers, business owners, sales professionals, we think that by giving people more choice, we're doing a good thing for them, but we're not necessarily. There was this study that was done in 2000, which called When Choice is Demotivating by a couple of people at Columbia and Stanford University. And what they did was put on a regular day in a supermarket this trestle table out with samples for jam. And one day there were 24 different kinds of jam, and the next day there were six types of jam. Now, the interesting thing is that on the day when there were 24 types of jam, more people actually stopped, but far less people bought. What we found was at the table, what they found, I wasn't involved in the study, um, but what they found was actually the table with six jams got 10 times more sales. If you've ever heard the phrase, if you confuse, you lose, that's this in action. It's this fact that we get thinking fatigue and honestly just give up. So that's kind of almost a bonus bit just to think about with the consumer psychology. So where does value show up in your business? There are three main areas. You'll find it in the product evolution, your pricing strategy, and of course your branding and messaging, which you would expect me to talk about. A classic example of this in the product evolution is Netflix versus Blockbuster. We all know what happened here. Blockbuster did not evolve with the times. So but what they both do is provide home entertainment. The job they did, or do still, provide home entertainment for people, but they did it in very different ways, and the value was very different. So to avoid this Netflix versus Blockbuster situation, honestly be aware of what job your offering is doing. And as things move on, can that job be done in a different way rather than the way that it's been done so far? If you keep an eye on your SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, then that will actually demonstrate an opportunity for you because your threat could be your opportunity. Blockbuster's threat here was emerging technology. It could have been their opportunity and they just didn't take it, whereas Netflix and other people did. But the problem that you've got in this situation is actually that Netflix, what they've done is provide a lot of functional value. So I'm interested to get your input here and to get you kind of involved in running through this practice. If we look at this B2C version of the elements of value, what I think both of them, Netflix and Blockbuster, both provide fun and entertainment. That's what the job was. But what additional value do you think Netflix provides? Can you just put it in the chat for us? So what can you see here? What additional elements of value do you think that Netflix provide that Blockbuster just didn't?
My apologies. Yeah, saving time, reducing effort, integration,
Yeah, okay,
avoiding
saves time.
hassle,
Brilliant, brilliant. Integration, absolutely. Anywhere in your home. Anything else?
variety.
Variety,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to say fun and entertainment because both of them do. Now, I think reduce costs as well also because Blockbuster, if you went to your you would hire one, I can't even remember how much, you'd hire one DVD or VHS for however much. You have unlimited access with Netflix, so that's an additional one. But what you might notice here is these are all clustered in functional elements. And the issue here is that Netflix has to, even though they were first to market, they've done incredibly well, it was a long time before they were profitable. And while it has ended Blockbuster, what they don't really have is much up here. The only element of value they've got in the emotional elements is fun and entertainment, which Blockbuster had as well. Now, this creates a problem for differentiation. And if anyone's got a streaming platform, they've probably got four, let's face it, or three, or whatever else, and you might be on somebody else's. It is a constant race to try to make sure that people continue with their subscriptions. It's also probably why Netflix have got all these, they've almost turned into a filming or production house. They have to produce exclusive things that you can't get on other platforms in order to keep people subscribing. That's what Paramount's done, it's what Disney's doing, it's what Apple's doing as well, because they're all in this kind of race to try and pull themselves up into this emotional kind of area where I love that show. I want to watch that show, and the only way that I can do it is by continuing to be a subscriber. So this is kind of the cautionary tale that while they did, while they are a market leader, I don't think they're probably as successful in real times as we'd like to think, and it's all a bit clustered at the bottom. So the next thing I want to move on to is pricing strategy. Value-based pricing, if you haven't heard of it before, is a strategy which focuses on perceived value of your offering rather than the production costs. The diagram on the right-hand side is a really simple demonstration where in both situations the costs are the same. So that's the purple bar, this is the cost to produce. But on the left-hand side, it's just adding a bit of margin, is the orange bit, whereas the value-based theory is that you figure out what it's worth to your customer and then you put your price somewhere in between what the result is worth and how much it costs you. But giving you a bit more margin, which is nice. The problem is with this is that you have to figure out what something is worth or what it can deliver, and that can be very difficult for some service-based businesses and honestly for some consumers as well. You can't necessarily put a monetary worth on all services. But somebody who writes about this and is absolutely brilliant is Jonathan Stark. He's got a book called Hourly Billing is Nuts, really helpful for the B2C, B2B, sorry, service-based businesses. Highly recommend his stuff. If you did want to try and figure out value-based pricing within your own business, then particularly for B2B, the kind of questions you'd ask is, what would you like to achieve? What is that worth to you? And then if we could achieve this result for this much money, would that work for you? So that would be a way of doing it. But the problem that we've got here is that the emotional side of buying. If it was as rational and as logical as that, everybody would have the same car or one of 5 to 10 different types of car. There'd be the family saloon, there'd be the roadster, there'd be the little drive about for the young person. That's all there would be. There'd also be on a cap on how much a car could cost, whereas it's staggering how much money you could buy a car for or how little you could get one for. And classic cars, I'm not sure that they would exist. Not particularly practical. Probably more like a work of art is probably like close to the comparison. So how do we account for this? The reason is when we go back to the business to consumer version of the elements of value, you would get we would highlight very different areas for the family estate, the sporty roadster, or the kind of electric car. So what I wanted to do, I don't think we really have enough time, is to quickly just repeat the same exercise to just try and highlight some of these elements. I'm going to see if we can quickly run through it. So I'm going to just allow like 2 minutes for this. So if we actually, let's go with the red one. Let's go with the red sports car. Which elements of value do you think the maybe the Porsches, the Jaguars, the Maseratis, if you put it in chat, and Louise, can you tell me what's coming through? And you're on mute.
I know, I'm just unmuting myself. Yep.
So what's coming through? The red sporty car.
Design, fun,
Design and aesthetics, cool.
and fun.
Fun and entertainment, yeah, nice.
And attractiveness.
Yeah, or that's what people might like to think. That might be an argument, but yeah, go on.
And the affiliation and belonging.
Nice, yeah, being part of people who've
Heirloom.
got it maybe depends on the car, some of them absolutely. I'm actually going to highlight badge value because it's kind of difficult to understand what that is. It is just about brand, having a Gucci handbag, having a Jag, but it's difficult to understand that. Anything else?
That's it so far, I think.
And then shall we just wax them in for the blue one for the Volvo? Nice family, stable, that sort of thing.
Reduces risk and provides access. We have
Provides access, reduces risk of actually, that's going to be down there. Reduces risk, good. Might reduce costs depending on fuel efficiency as well. I'm going to put quality.
quality has just popped up from Tom.
Good, great. And stuff like that. So, very clear demonstration. You see where the Volvo is, where the family estate is, very much at the bottom, functional, rational, all the rest of it. You see where the elements of value for the car that is far more expensive are. They're all a bit further up. They're all functional. And the fact is, the red car probably does an awful lot of what this does too. I wouldn't say it necessarily reduces risk, unless you're the driver's probably the problem there. But there's quality there, definitely there. So there's some functional elements. So this is just to demonstrate that kind of area. So moving on to how do you actually sell emotional value? Start with the product itself, actually. You do need strong branding and clear messaging, but if you consider the emotional values that you can provide with the Bain's elements of value and then integrate that into the product, what I mean by that is everything from how the car door sounds when you close it demonstrates quality. It is not just about the badge on it. Those elements in the product will matter, and then very clear branding and messaging. Once you demonstrate or you consider the emotional value that you do provide from the Bain's elements of value, is that do a bit of a messaging audit. Is there a change that you can make to your offering that would make it more clear? And there are elements of behavioral science and nudge theory that also would be helpful. So, what's next for you? So, I would say next thing for you to do, review Bain's and Co's elements of value. I'll provide the links to both of them and identify the value elements that you provide. You also want to then prioritize those for your customers because if you provide 10 elements of value, they will not all be equal in the eyes of your customers. So prioritize those and also have a look at how strong they are for you, whether you actually do have strength in them. And if you don't, is there a way that you can deliver on them better? Then run a messaging audit and make sure that everything from your product to your messaging makes it clear. If you want support with that, then we also provide a customer value scope where we do a deep dive into your customer values. I take you through the whole process. But we've also got a whole range of free resources as well that you could access if you'd like.